Welcome back everyone to another Kerbal Space Program video, and in today's Kerbal Space Program video we're going to be sending a roving base to Minmus. For those of you who do not know, Minmus is one of Kerbin's moons. It's like the Mun, except Minmus is has much less gravity, and on Minmus it is like one of the most interesting things about Minmus is that it has the Minmus flats, which, as you can probably guess, are really flat terrain. I'm pretty sure there's like no bumps whatsoever on the Minmus flats. And Minmus is also the color green. Pretty interesting. We'll actually see exactly what color it is today when we land on it with this roving base. This base, I'll admit, is probably not the best looking one I've ever made. It's actually probably one of the worst, but gonna go for some function over style here. Yeah, this is just since this is not a science mode save, I'm not bothering to put any science equipment on there. If you guys want, I could start a science mode playthrough. Let me know in the comments. But yeah, talking more about the construction now, as you may have noticed before, that I put in those cargo bays, and I had some radial ore tanks, and that mining drill, so we can mine for ore and turn it into fuel. But I did completely forget to put any sort of convertitron or anything on this roving base, so we can't actually turn it into fuel at all, which is kind of bad. And there's no docking ports or anything, so there's no way we can transfer that ore. But at least we can still roll around Minmus and stuff like that. And here you can see I'm just covering up that top area with these structural panels. It was a fairly normal build here. But one thing that I did have trouble with was like the wheels, because I couldn't like figure out which wheels to use. I didn't know, should I go for like those gray ones, or should I go for the tannish ones, or the big Saturn V crawlers. I decided after not that long of thinking to go with the little gray ones, because the tan ones, they were a bit too, like, they were not big enough, and the wheelbase was very narrow, so like the balance was really poor. And on the Saturn V crawler wheels, they were too big for this roving base. Maybe in the future we'll do another one and we can utilize those, but they're not the best because their turning rate is very slow, and they're also just really big and cumbersome, so I don't really use them that much. And now I'm just putting on some finishing like details on the craft, or on the roving base, like the wheels I was mentioning. Those are the little gray ones I was talking about. I'm blanking on the name right now. But yeah, I just put 6 of those on, 3 on each side, to kind of help us move. Yeah, that's pretty much the whole construction. After this, I'm just gonna put on a vector engine to help with the descent. But everything else is pretty normal. Some of you you may have noticed that I put those Mark II command modules there in the rover form, just so that they can exit from there and use the ladders to get down. And this was actually the reason why I did this test, to see if they could get back up, because that narrow space between those 2 panels didn't look big enough for the Kerbals to fit through. So I'm just gonna tilt that ladder and move those panels over a little bit so that they can fit better. I mean, now that I think about it, we probably could have just used the Kerbal's EVA pack, but it's always good to have that just in case they run out of monopropellant while they're on EVA, or anything else like that happens. And right now we are just binding everything to an action group. So I was binding those drills and those cargo bay doors to open with an action group, and now I'm just putting on the engine. May have seen very quickly, because the footage is sped up, that I did put, I was thinking about using aerospike engines, but the aerospike has no gimbal on it, and I would need at least some gimbal, but I just went with the vector because it has enormous gimbal, as you can see right here, but a little bit too much. You can see when you're trying to land, you'll notice this on any craft, when you're trying to land and you get very close to the ground, or you get very close to zero, the retrograde on the nav ball starts to move. So if you don't change yourself to the stabilization assist on the nav ball, you're just gonna wobble all over the place, and it won't go well. But here you can see I successfully landed, and I was just playing around at that point, you know, burning with the vector at full throttle to see what would happen. And now doing some final touches, so I'm putting on those Werner engines so that when we land, we're going to be landing on the tail of the rover, and we're going to come down on the front. So I put those Werners there just to help us not smash into the ground. And here I moved us into the vehicle assembly building. I always like to build my rovers in the spaceplane hangar just because everything is already horizontal, and then you can just switch editors to come back into the vehicle assembly building to assemble the rocket. That was pretty standard, just a regular decoupler, and now I'm building the fairing. Not too crazy of a rocket, just went with a skipper stage for my transfer stage, and then a mammoth stage at the bottom to help us with the ascent from Kerbin. Adding some fins and just putting in some batteries there, and I'm actually going to put in some batteries and solar panels just so we have power to you know, rove around and stuff. Nothing too crazy. Yeah, at this point the build is pretty much done. There's nothing is going to happen that I really haven't mentioned yet about the build. Just finishing it up. Actually, this is a good time. If you guys are enjoying this video or enjoying any videos that I'm posting, make sure to subscribe or like. Yeah, I'm getting pretty decent views, but we could get that like rating and that subscriber count up. So, yeah. I need to say these things to appease to the YouTube algorithm. No, but now we're just going into the launch. And, you know, this launch, pretty simple. Standard ascent profile. Once you get to about 1,000 meters, start pitching over, and then by the time you get to 10,000 meters in altitude, you want to be at about 45 degrees on the nav ball. And then from there, you can kind of just gradually keep pitching yourself down, I don't know how you would describe that. Keep tapping D on the keyboard until you're pretty much horizontal. And now you can see that our orbit our orbital burn is going to be very efficient because of our ascent profile. So that is very good. And then, there goes the fairing. And I was just testing those cargo bays right there and the solar panels. I probably should have waited to deploy those solar panels because we weren't completely out of the atmosphere. If you don't know, Kerbin's atmosphere ends at around 70 kilometers. And we were at 64 kilometers, I believe. But it's okay. We're not going fast enough, and the atmosphere is not dense enough to do any significant damage to the solar panels. And we just got into orbit. That happened quickly. Now I'm just changing our plane relative to Minmus. Minmus is on a very different plane relative to the equatorial orbit on Kerbin. So we had to adjust it quite a bit, but nothing that we can't do. And just about to do that burn right now. Yes, it's gonna happen, I think. Yep, it's happening right now. And there we go. So now our plane is adjusted, so now we can get a maximally efficient transfer into Minmus. So here I'm just adjusting our maneuver node to have a good encounter, and I'm going to aim to land on the Minmus flats. So our orbit should pass over them. If you're going equatorial on Minmus, you will be passing over the Minmus flats at some point. So you won't really have to worry about that if you can get into equatorial orbits. Now I'm just time warping to the maneuver node to execute the burn. This is not too crazy stuff. Every Kerbal mission that you need to get into orbit or get to any other planet has stages like this. It's not really the most entertaining, but we need to do them, so we are going to do them. And this is when I started having some problems with the vector. Because the thrust was so much, I actually ended up lowering the thrust limiter to get our orange line to match up with our purple line, and the purple line being our planned trajectory. But what you can do is I actually planned a maneuver node closer to Minmus. That way it would be a longer burn to get onto get equatorial, and it's not as efficient as if we were to do it earlier, but it would be easier to make sure that it was more precise. Alright, pulling those solar panels. I actually don't know why I retracted them, but I can just deploy them again, and now we're burning, and there we go. On Minmus and the Mun, you can pretty much, I like to aim for about 20 kilometers. You don't really have to, you could aim for like much lower, because there's no atmosphere and the gravity is very low. But I like to do that just in case of any hills that we come into contact with, or that we might come in contact with while we're orbiting. And here we are, we're getting ready to circularize at Minmus, and we have just done that now. And you can see, I actually really like Minmus. This is probably one of the most interesting places to go, just because, you know, it's very easy to land on, you don't need that much fuel. And it looks really great. I like the color of Minmus, and the Minmus flats are awesome for roving bases or for rovers. And yeah, that's pretty much my 2 cents on Minmus. But here we go, starting the descent, or well, we already started the descent, but now we're getting much closer to the surface. And here's where the vector is going to come in handy. And this way we only have to do one burn because of its thrust to weight ratio. And doing one burn to land is always much more efficient than doing multiple burns, because if you start your engines and then cut the throttle, you're going to speed up again, and then you're just going to have to burn for speed that you didn't really need to account for if you did one burn. But you don't really have to worry about it that much in Kerbal Space Program. So we're landed. I was just testing the drills, and at this point is when I realized that we didn't actually have any convertertrons or anything. So I just retracted them because the cargo bay doors were clipping into everything. Oh, Bob almost smashed into the solar panels. That would not be very good. But yeah, and then another problem that I ran into this time, well, I actually don't know what happened right there. That was actually kind of funny. We got launched away from it. But the torque on those wheels is actually too much, so you'll see it a little bit later. But when we try and go forward, we actually start lifting up, and we can't actually drive around. So, you know, this was a really bad design on my part. I probably should have thought about this way more and accounted for that. But, you know, we could always use that vector to propel us, and then just use the steering capabilities to help ourselves turn. And yeah, there's a nice shot of Valentina and Bob Kerbin. Now I'm just getting them back onto the roving base, and there's the ladder worked. And I wanted to actually test if I could get into the hatch right there, because I had thought that when I was putting those panels on, I had obstructed the hatch. So I wouldn't have been able to get on. It wouldn't have really mattered, because we also have those other access doors on the Mark II command pods. But, you know, I just want to test them. But that's the video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Next week, I thought this would actually be a good transition, but next week's video is actually going to be a tutorial on how to land on Minmus. So stick around for next week's video, and I hope you guys enjoyed. See you in the next one. Bye.